1988, when the United States was barely a country,
Right.
was having its sailors taken as slaves by the Barbary states, the states of the Ottoman Empire in North Africa.
Tripoli.
Tripoli.
The shores of Tripoli.
Shores of Tripoli. And its people, his ships stopped, its crews carried off into slavery. We estimate 1.5 million European and American slaves taken between 1750 and 1815. Jefferson and Adams went to their ambassador in London and said, why do you do this to us? The United States has never had a quarrel with the Muslim world of any kind. We weren't in the Crusades. We weren't in the war in Spain. Why do you do this to our people and our ships? Why do you plunder and enslave our people? And the ambassador said very plainly, Mr. Abdul Rahman said, because the Quran gives us permission to do so, because you are infidels. And that's our answer. And Jefferson said, well, in that case, I will send a navy which will crush your state, which he did, and a good thing, too. Islamic fundamentalism is not created by American democracy. It's a lie to say so. It's a masochistic lie, and it excuses those who are the real criminals, and it blames us for the attacks made upon us. Don't have anything to do with this mentality.
The argument that we're there fighting them so that they won't come and fight us is
a bullshit
equally
argument.
ridiculous argument.
Fight them everywhere.
You ask anyone in London this summer whether they felt that the attacks weren't coming to them, and they'd have said, no, that argument's absurd. Of course, that they are going to be attacking all over the world, be it Morocco, Istanbul, London, and those countries are
involved. And Mr. Blair says, we'll fight them everywhere they do.
Is there not a difference between...
We'll fight them everywhere they do.
I know they hate us anyway. I agree. They hate us anyway. But there's a big difference between...
Who hates you? Muslims hate you?
Well, I think everybody in the world hates us now.
Well,
it's not just Muslims.
This is the point, Bill, that 10,000 new bin Ladens have been created by the policy that your country has adopted.
What kind of Ladens?
Bin Ladens.
Oh, bin Ladens.
10,000 new bin Ladens have been created because of the policy that has been followed. And this is the biggest test of a policy. Has it made things better or made things worse? And my belief is that Muslims are not angry with us because of who or what we are, but because of what we do. They're angry with us because of our support for Sharon's Israel, principally. Do you know that every one of those settlers in the Gaza Strip got $250,000 to leave land they should never have been on in the first place, and you paid for it?
Well, I would argue with you about that.
Do you really think that if America pulled all of its bases out of Saudi Arabia,
we did.
fulfilled all the conditions that Al-Qaeda has said in the past that it wanted, that suddenly you'd see no more Al-Qaeda attacks around the world?
I'm not advocating negotiating with bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. I want you to negotiate.
Why not?
I want you to negotiate with the Muslims who haven't joined them yet, but who might join them tomorrow or the next day.
But excuse me, Mr. Maher, I have to, if you let me say this, I won't want to say anything more on this show. What Mr. Galloway has just said is quite false. Mr. Galloway trades a better set of manners when he's in Los Angeles from the one that he exhibits when he's in, say, Syria on state television, when he praises the martyrs and the jihadists and the 150 or so operations they conduct every day in Iraq. He goes there to stir it up, and then he comes here to tell us, watch out, they're being nasty. That's, I think, disgraceful.
Well, that's what Arafat used to do.
It seems to me that, I don't know if it does to you, Mr. bin Laden is a kind of one-of-a-kind guy. I don't think there are 10,000 people like him. And if they're clones of him, suppose there are that many clones, where does he come from? What did American policy do to make him declare war on us?
American policy invented him. I'm astounded at that. It was the United States who invented bin Laden. They sent him to Afghanistan. They gave him money and guns. Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, the president who was being praised by your on the one hand but on the other author a minute ago. Ronald Reagan paid for bin Laden. He's the one who sent him to Afghanistan. You've made this Frankenstein monster of Islamist fundamentalism. Now you want to punish the Afghans for a guy that you sent there.
The Afghans had the right to fight against the Soviet invasion of their country, which Mr. Galloway supported. That's the first thing. The second thing is the CIA did not invent Mr. bin Laden.
Can we talk about bin Laden
Mr. Bin Laden was
instead
sent
of me?
there on sui generis by a Saudi
Yes, a rather unhealthy personal obsession with me. Can we talk about the issue?
Well, it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy to have to consider, Mr. Galloway.
Nobody here even knows me. Why don't we talk about bin Laden? And talk about Al-Qaeda, talk about
We're not going to talk about him as if he's our fault, Mr. Galloway, however slimily you put it.
Are you in the United States, man?
We're not going to blame him for, we're not going to blame ourselves for...
I love it when the British fight.
There's nothing British
about it. There's only one better fight, and that's a chick fight. I think we all know that.
There's nothing British about Mr. Galloway. He's a fifth column run from the Middle East in British politics.
Wow.
And it is quite false to say that anyone protesting against General Sharon's policy in Gaza or anywhere else in Israel would decide, let's grab a couple of plane loads of American civilians and fly them into a couple of buildings full of American and international civilians. General Sharon wasn't the Prime Minister of Israel at the time. Mr. Clinton was trying to negotiate a deal with Mr. Barak and Mr. Arafat at the time when those people landed in our country and began their conspiracy against us. Anyone who says that we're to blame for it is carrying water for the people who committed the crime.
I'm just getting at how to be safer. And you talked about the hijackers. They found out that of the hijackers, only the guys who were actually flying the planes had completely shaved their bodies. In other words, they were ready to meet their maker and get the virgins. The other guys, they think, because they weren't shaved, were duped into the mission. They didn't know it was a suicide mission. They thought they were going to Disneyland. So that tells me that they couldn't even muster up 19 people who wanted to go on a suicide mission. Like I say, there's one thing to hate us. It's another thing, how many people can you get to take action? And I'm worried that this war in Iraq is the thing because it's a Christian army in a Muslim land.
You worry they're running out of suicide bombers?
No, they are certainly not running out of suicide bombers in Iraq. What you hear now is that
in Iraq, no.
In Iraq, no. That people they have so many people now willing to be suicide bombers that what you're hearing is that they have not only one person in the vehicle that's driving the explosives, they've got a person alongside them because they have so many people.
And they sent a Down syndrome.
Somebody riding shotguns.
They sent a Down syndrome girl with a. They sent a Down syndrome girl with a backpack to toddle into an election poll booth in Baghdad.
That's it. Now I hate them.
Right.
So no, before I was iffy on suicide bombers, Chris, but now you've...
They won't run out, no. By the way, what they should have done, they should have consulted the Israeli line and the Talmudic line on this, because they would have found that with every 72 virgins that they get in paradise, they also get 72 mothers-in-law. So perhaps... Perhaps in the end, your worry about them running out of suicide murderers will be justified.
Okay, but should we negotiate with terror? I mean, George Bush said a while ago, he said there is no way to make peace with those whose only goal is death. And I would submit that their goal isn't death. Death is their method, as is anyone in a war. And by our own definition of terrorism, which is purposely killing civilians, America has been terrorist. We purposely killed lots of civilians in Hiroshima and Dresden.
We have years of history in Europe of negotiating with various terrorist organizations.
Right, the IRA.
ETA. The Red Brigade, but those were organizations that had specific demands. They had specific territorial requests, and there was a framework in which you could negotiate. They had a set of demands, and you could negotiate with those demands. Al-Qaeda is different. There is something non-negotiable about Al-Qaeda. I don't believe that there is a set of demands that Osama bin Laden could come up with, and that we could tick off and suddenly say, okay, it's all over, the jihad is over.
Fish need water in which to swim. The water in which these fish are swimming is created by the perceived injustice of our policy towards the Muslim world, towards the Israel-Palestine question, towards the propping up of the corrupt kings and puppet presidents of the Arab world, towards the whole issue of Iraq. This is the water in which these people swim. That's what we have to dry up if we're going to deal with these people. But on the subject of terrorism, Florida is full of people who have harbored terrorist designs upon Cuba for almost 40 years. And nobody's kicking them out of Florida. In fact, they're part and parcel of their